My name is Sylvain Calinon, and I will be talking about human-robot collaboration. I'm from the IDIAP Research Institute. It's an institute in Martigny, in Switzerland, in the Swiss Alps. And our institute is specialized in AI and machine learning. It's about 200 persons working in the field of machine learning with different research topics. And we have been here since 1991. We have a joint development plan with EPFL, and our main focus is to develop AI techniques to improve quality of life. And at IDIAP, I'm heading the Robot Learning and Interaction Group. We are interested in manipulation skills for various forms of robotic applications. First, we are interested in robot manufacturing applications that are for SMEs. And for SMEs, you have a need that is very different compared to the big industrial structures, in the sense that you need to collaborate with your robots. You need to share the same workspace. You need these robots to be reprogrammed frequently because of the short product cycles, because of the multiple variants of products, and because simply we would like these robots to be used for different tasks. We are also interested in other forms of robots that are here to assist us. Robots that are close to us, parts of us, or far away from us. In the first case, with the robots close to us, we are interested in healthcare application. For robots that are parts of us, we mean by that prosthetic hands, which are another form of robots. And robots that are far away from us means that we have these machines that need to work remotely. And ideally, we would like the persons to feel as if they were on site. So it can be, for example, in the case of a disaster situation. It can also be remote places that are too difficult to reach, such as space missions or underwater missions. And in all of these cases, we need these machines to be reprogrammed. It means that we don't know in advance the environments, we don't know in advance the tasks, and we would like to have personalized behaviors. So it means we cannot use a standard computer language to do that. If we would use the tools provided by robot manufacturers, the problem is that we would have to code each time we want a new task, a new user, or a new environment. So instead of this, our group is doing research in the field of imitation learning. We would like to have these robots learning on their own by being taught by user what to do. So to have learning from human demonstrations. So what is interesting in learning from demonstration is that we have a bilateral interaction between the user and the robot. So it's not a typical machine learning problem. In standard machine learning problems, we have the data set already being here. We train a model on this data set, and later on we reuse the model to do some other task. Here in this case, we can also act on the data set itself, because if we have good technologies, it means we can acquire better data for the robot. So we call it either an interaction behavior, or we can also call it a scaffolding behavior. The other aspect that is challenging but also helpful at the same time is the fact that we can combine different learning strategies. Indeed, it's not only about imitation learning, it's also about having the robot learning the task on its own, so to use some form of self-refinement or practice. And it's also about having users that can collaborate in different ways with the robot. Typically, it could be that one user is providing information about one part of the task, and another user would provide a different kind of information for another part of the task. And the robot has to fuse these different sources of information in order to progress in the acquisition of the skill. So for this reason, I like to view the problem as a scaffolding problem. It's a term that we can use as a metaphor to explain that when we are acquiring some skills, we first need a lot of support, but progressively, when we are mastering the task or the skill, we can remove these supports. So it's a bit the same as when you construct a house. At the beginning, you need a lot of scaffold, but once the construction is progressing, you can remove these scaffolds. And at the end, you would like your house to stand on its own. So for a robot skill, it's the same. At the beginning, you need a lot of interactions with the users, but progressively, if the robot has done the task again and again, then you progressively don't need the user if the task doesn't change. So behind that, it's not only recording and replaying the same motion. What we would like instead is to have a robot that can adapt the task to new situations. So if I'm giving the example of lifting up this box, then if I'm changing the shape of the box, I would like my robot to adapt to this new box without having to retrain it. So we need some form of generalization. Maybe I also want to change the robot. Maybe it's a new model. Maybe I want to have a new robot manufacturer. So it's important that the essence of the skill can also be kept in memory so that we can transfer the skill to a new platform. So here in this case, the robot has to understand what is really the purpose of lifting the box. What are the essential features? What are the essential characteristics that we need if we want to tackle these different generalization challenges? So let me give you an example that we developed a few years ago about a robot that was taught how to scrape cheese off onto a plate. We called it Roboclet, and here a cheese master demonstrated this task. So at the beginning, we have a robot that doesn't know the task very well, as you will see on the video, and then the robot is being corrected. So we have the cheese master here that will guide the robot by the hand. So by grabbing the hand of the robot and moving the hand of the robot, the cheese master can demonstrate what to do. So it's a very intuitive mechanism that can be used as a way to collect demonstration data. And this is the video, the animations about what is behind that. So behind that, we have a robot collecting various sources of data. We have information about the movement itself through proprioception. We also have a force sensor that will collect information about how much pressure we apply to the cheese. And here, by providing about 10 demonstrations, we can also understand how to modulate the movement with respect to the size of the cheese. Because here, as the cheese will melt, and as we are serving this cheese, then the height of the cheese will change. So it means we need to make shorter movement. And instead of programming that explicitly, we use the demonstrations in order to convey this information. So here during reproduction, we will have this combination of this data. One will be about the pressure to apply. The other one will be about the dynamic of the movement. In this case, it's a specific velocity profile that is required to make the task well. And later on, we have this generalization behavior so that the robot can scrape the cheese off onto the plate in a correct way. So obviously, we don't use that only for this kind of application. So we are interested in various forms of robotics, and one, as I mentioned, is including assistive robots. And here I wanted to show an example with the iDress project that we have been working on, which is about providing an assistance to users for dressing tasks. So here in these applications, what is challenging is that it's not only a one-to-one interaction, it's actually a three-party interaction. Because we have the caregiver or the medical staff who needs to understand what is the requirement of the users. And then this caregiver will provide demonstrations to the robot so that the robot can later on assist the person. And in this case, we are talking about assistive dressing tasks. So here I will show a few videos that we have developed in our group. So here it's a video from our lab, where we were testing how a robot can help to put on the sleeve of a jacket. And in this kind of task, what we would like is to have a force in the direction of the jacket, but the robot remaining compliant in the other directions, so that the user doesn't feel constrained by the robot. So the challenge here is, again, to combine these different sources of information. So we could test that with one sleeve or with two sleeves at the same time. And we also explored how this could be applied to the scenario of a shoe that we need first to grasp and to bring toward the foot of the users. And here having this communication with the users in order to understand in an haptic way when the user is ready to put on the shoe. Then another example is in a different project called Switch, that is in collaborations with the Josef Stefan Institute in Ljubljana in Slovenia. This project is about helping someone to stand up and sit down. Here we also need forces, and this video is explaining what's the underlying problem behind that, what's the underlying challenge. Here what we need is to have the robot being compliant in some directions, but stiff in other directions. And what it means by that is that we can emulate a virtual cane if we do this, in the sense that the user can place the cane where he or she would like, but then by pushing on the cane, you have this support that is provided to help at standing up or sitting down. So we applied that also to humanoid robots. Here it's with the purpose of having assistance that is not only for this specific activity, but to have a much broader range of activity that can be provided if you have robots in a humanoid shape. But from a research perspective, it's very complicated to do that because you have a robot that is not anymore attached to a table. You have a robot that needs to stand on its 2 feet and that needs to balance itself. So when a humanoid is on its own, it's somehow okay. But if the robot also has to pull the user, then we need to understand what is the distribution of the forces and what is the correct behavior to adapt in terms of pose in order to assist the user without falling. Then I also mentioned at the beginning of my presentation that we also would like to have robots working at remote places. And these are some examples of tasks like this where we need to teleoperate the robot, but ideally we would like to feel as if we were on site. So here it's the Dextrov project, a big European project that was involving many partners. And we had the chance to work here with a bimanual underwater platform that was teleoperated from a teleoperation center. So we had a teleoperation center far away. We had this virtual reality environment. And the goal for the user is to feel as if the task is easy. In reality, on the other side, under the sea, what will happen is that there will be perturbations. So if we need to turn this valve, what will happen locally is that you will need corrections in order to align the gripper of the robot with the valve. And in this project, instead of having the user caring about this perturbation, we don't have the user knowing about the perturbation, but locally we had some AI technique that was aligning automatically the gripper with the valve without having the users that needs to make these corrections. At the bottom, you see a similar video, but this time in our lab, with 2 robots, one being used as input, the other one being used as output, so the one being teleoperated. And as you can see, the valves are placed differently, but even if we have this discrepancy in the locations of the valves, for this user doesn't care. The user is doing the task locally, and on the other side, the robot will adapt. Another point that is important for AI in robotics is to take into account that data in robotics are varied. It's not only about controlling joint angles. We have also data that is related to the location of the gripper or the hand of the robot. And this location is typically described with orientation data. We have also other objects that are also geometric, so we need mathematics behind to understand what is manipulability, what is stiffness, what is inertia. We also need to transform the plans of the robot and to analyze the plans of the robot. And often these are also another mathematic form with trees, graphs, or networks that we need to encode in some way. And finally, we have another geometric object that is related to planes, lines, that we also need to handle. So far, I was talking a lot about the learning algorithms that we need. But in reality, if we have only these learning algorithms, it's not enough. We also need softwares that are easy to use. We need tools that are easy to use, that are user-friendly. And it means that we need to think about what we should use. Like on the left side, you can see the teaching pendants that we have in industry, but that are bulky and difficult to use. On the right side, you have virtual reality headsets, which can be difficult to wear all day. What we are doing in our group instead is to consider smartphones as a device that we can use, that is easy to use, that is cheap, and where we can still use augmented reality capability in order to have a virtual robot being displayed, meaning that the user can monitor the task, can reprogram the robot, can detect what the robot has learned, and can make corrections before running the task on the real robot. So in this summit, we will present Drobot. So you can see it. It's on the right side here. It's a drawing robot. We can explain there what we are doing. There is also some learning from demonstration aspects. It's a robot that is also exhibited at the Unilschuv Museum, Musée de la Main. It's an exhibition on AI. And here, the robot can also draw portraits, and the robot has been running here for about 1 year. So thanks for your attention, and I'm happy to see you also at our booth.